Welcome to episode 6 of Biomimicry Ecotone. My name is Gamel Sibanda. I'm a B Pro. Just call me Gamma.
My name is Hugo Araujo, and I'm a B Pro as well. And I'm really glad to present Daniel Kinzer from Hawaii. Please, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Daniel Kinzer. Currently in the biomimicry professional cohort, we were put on pause for the past year due to COVID. My focus is really in education and conservation. I'm also really interested in the intersection between biomimicry and traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous practices. My undergraduate degree was in cognitive neuroscience and psychology, partly my love of nature that pulled me into education. I got invited to visit the alternative education program that was all outdoors in nature with what we call at-risk youth that have recently launched Pacific Blue Studios. For example, exciting workshop coming up next month. It's called Coastal Biocultural Restoration as a Nexus for Innovation. We're looking at how different indigenous communities in collaboration with scientists, nonprofits, government agencies, businesses, looking to our shorelines where we're seeing a lot of effects of climate change, pollution, unsustainable development. There's a lot of talk around blue economy. What we see happening in some of those spaces is a springboard for innovative ideas, new technologies, new applications of data, new sensor technologies, climate change adaptation and mitigation technologies and policies. It's rooted in reconnect, in ethos.
What would be your approach on the global scale of the ecosystems?
One of my favorite parts of the B Pro experience is the opportunity to visit different ecosystems, different continents, and begin to sort of piece together patterns in the relationships that you see. You know, my life has largely been connected to and revolved around a relationship to the ocean. It helps with developing more of an island worldview. You know, you see how everything is connected and that actually the earth is just a fractal version of an island, right? Sitting in space. People often ask me about Pacific Blue Studios, are you building a school? I said, no, I'm not. Definitely last thing I would ever do is build another school. That's a terrible idea. But I'm growing a network, right? I'm seeding a network that is going to help young people operate locally, but be connected globally.
As part of your B Pro course, which are some of the regions that you have visited so far?
I actually got to spend some time in Antarctica. You're watching life flourish and thrive in this environment that feels so harsh and so inhospitable. And I think it's one of the reasons I love the ocean as well, is that as soon as you start thinking you're highly evolved and you're stuck out at sea, you realize how poorly adapted we are in so many cases to living on this planet. Meanwhile, so many of our non-human friends are navigating that waterscape so easily, or that frozen landscape in Antarctica so seemingly so easily. The Weddell seal, which is the mammal able to live the furthest south, it stays in Antarctica all winter. And it has these incredible teeth that it uses to carve out holes in the ice so that it can breathe, right? And then it's able to not just carve out those holes, but it has to go find them, right? It's diving down beneath the dark ice. It's totally dark there in the winter. And it's going down, it's hunting, it's finding its food, and then it's navigating back to these small holes in the ice. Such intelligence, right? And you think about who's more evolved in that space. In many indigenous cultures, there's a lot of concern about losing the language because language is so critical to expressing culture. But one of his daughters said, I'm not so concerned about losing the language. I'm more concerned about losing the forest. If we have the forest, we can find our language again. Nature is sensing its context all of the time. The internet is this amazing tool and we have all this data flooding into our life, but most of that data is separate from our actual biological, ecological context. Knowledge transfer happens best when we are deeply tuned in, these immersive experiences. I think it's one of the powers of the B Pro program. We think of navigation in a way where we put a point into a GPS system and then some controlled computer algorithm directs us to what's the shortest path to get to that point. The Hawaiian navigators didn't imagine getting to an island. They were imagining that they were pulling the island to them. So they were looking for that island in signs in their environment, and they would link to those signs. They knew the relationship between where they were and where they came from. They were paying attention to these signs in their environment to figure out how to pull an island to them. They found islands because they could see the signs in how the swell direction would be wrapping, how the clouds would be forming on the horizon, what direction the birds were flying in, what direction the dolphins or the fish were moving in, when they would encounter certain species that they knew from their home islands lived at certain depths of the sea. He will tell you the 4 or 5 or 6 ocean swells that are passing under the canoe. And he'll tell you the direction that they're coming from. And he can feel it in his body. We are amazing biology. We have incredible sensing technologies built in, just like the rest of the natural world. And I don't think that we use them. Having knowledge be something that doesn't exist in one person's mind, but exists in a collective of minds is really interesting to me. There's a new office at the University of Hawaii called the Office of Indigenous Innovation. They're being asked to really think about, what does the idea of indigenous artificial intelligence mean? What does the idea of indigenous augmented reality or mixed reality mean? How can we use some of these technologies? Some humans serve the planet best by migrating. Knowledge, the energy transfer that happens with that human movement, we're going to have to learn to live on a very different planet than the one we live on now. Fit in to an ecosystem, not just survive and dominate an ecosystem, use our technologies to sort of further isolate ourselves and entrench ourselves. So the Hawaiians, the way they transferred knowledge was through dance and through chant. Sometimes, and many indigenous cultures have chants that can go on for days.